This book I have here with me has been described as one of the greatest novels ever written. And I think it is a fair judgment. Anna Karenina, by the great author sage Leo Tolstoy. And it is my wife's favorite book. In this episode, we're gonna analyze a few excerpts from it, but we'll do that from a very specific perspective, which is that of your own personal and spiritual growth. What is the message, the lesson that is in this book that you can take with you for your own personal and spiritual development? That's the question that we're going to try to answer today. And stay till the very end, because I'll tell you more about a highly advanced, spiritually advanced individual. There's a great example of that here. And how he behaves and how he understands the universe and his place in it. That's what we'll analyze today. Aren't you curious? Let's dive right in. If you want to find happiness, fulfillment, the meaning of life, which is what Levin is trying to find, don't look for it in the dimension of time, in the dimension of space. Don't look for it in tomorrow, in yesterday, or there, or over there, or in the top of a mountain. No. Learn to return to that place where the meaning can truly be found. What that is, we'll see what Levin finds. Hello there. My name is Alex, and welcome to another episode. This time we have another great book, a real classic, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I have two versions of the book with me, actually. Both of them Penguin Classics. It's the same translation. This one is a nicer cloth-bound Classics edition by Penguin Classics. And this one is just the usual Penguin Classics paperback. Why I have two, they are not mine actually, I have to confess, they are my wife's. And my wife has strictly prohibited me from highlighting anything in this nicer version. So therefore I have used her old worn out version to highlight a few passages that I'm gonna share with you. But before I do that, let's start with a few facts about the book. This has been appraised as one of the greatest novels ever written. It's a true classic, one of the best rated novels out there. It's a bit old. This was written in the late 19th century. And a fun fact about it is that initially this was released as a series. There are parts. It has 8 parts in total. And as I understand it, the 8 parts were released independently in a magazine. So we can say this is a 19th century series. Probably this is the origin of all the series that we now watch on the TV. The title, Anna Karenina, is the name of one of the protagonists. I was discussing this with my wife. She's pretty convinced that the main character in the novel is not Anna, but rather a guy called Levin. And I would agree with it, actually. And Levin is the character that we are going to be focusing on today. Curiously, Levin is a character that is based on Tolstoy himself. As you probably know, Tolstoy can probably be regarded as one of the figures in literature that have been very wise. I think Tolstoy, if you Google for Tolstoy's image, I think it's like the archetype of an old, wise man, such as, I don't know, Dumbledore or Gandalf. Tolstoy is the same kind of character. And Levin, the character that we're going to be analyzing, is based on Tolstoy himself. It is believed that the life of Levin here in the book is based on autobiographical events in Tolstoy's life, and obviously the philosophical underpinning of Levin's character as well as his development of course embodies Tolstoy's own philosophy and Tolstoy's most important values. And of course those are very deep values, spiritual values that we're going to be analyzing today. So without further ado, let's dive right in. This is towards the end of the book, but don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything. Oh yes, before I say anything, this is a very nice book, the cloth-bound edition, but it has a preface, and there is a huge spoiler in the preface, so I am going to take this opportunity to informally complain with Penguin Classics. Why would you put such a huge spoiler in the preface of such a nice edition? Anyway, according to my wife, it's general knowledge to know how this ends. So according to her, it's on me, but I disagree. I didn't know how the book ends before I read the preface, and then I had to read all the 800 pages knowing how it ends. Anyway, let's forget that. This was my chance to complain, so I took it. Anyway, let's dive right in. This is towards the end of the book. And this is the pinnacle of Levin's character development that I want to analyze. Throughout the story, to give you a bit of context, Levin, he is, I don't know how old, probably in his late 20s, early 30s, I would imagine. And throughout the book, his character goes through a lot of development. He is challenged by life like we all are, and obviously challenges forge our values, and the same happens here with Levin. His brother dies, and ever since his brother dies, he is with him when he dies. He cares for him in the last days of his life. But ever since that happens, Levin starts questioning himself, very deep questions around the meaning of life, really. And this is where he's at this particular time in the story. Without knowing what I am and why I'm here, it's impossible for me to live. And I cannot know that, therefore I cannot live, Levin would say to himself. In infinite time, in the infinity of matter, in infinite space, a bubble organism separates itself. And that bubble holds out for a while and then bursts. And that bubble is me. So, quite deep reflections to start with. So, what Levin is reflecting is the insignificance of his own little self. In the huge infinity of time, imagine how old is the universe. I don't know, I think it's something like 14 billion years old, something like that. At least, I don't know, don't quote me on that. But how infinite space is. I mean, this was written in the 19th century. I imagine by now we know so much more about the vastness of the universe and how insignificant we are in relation to all of that. So this is even a more accurate reflection today. And he's saying, I am just a bubble that separates itself, holds out for a while, and then bursts, and then I die. The whole day, Levin thought about the one and only thing that occupied him during this time. Apart from farm care, he's a farmer, and sought in everything a link to his questions. What am I? And where am I? And why am I here? So he's in the period of starting to think deeper thoughts. Why is all this being done? He thought. What am I standing here and making them work for? He's looking at the people that work for him. He's like the manager of a farm. Why are they all bustling about and trying to show me their zeal? Why is this old woman toiling so? I know her. She's Matriona. I treated her when a beam fell on her during a fire. He thought. That time she recovered. But today or tomorrow or in 10 years, they'll bury her, and nothing will be left of her. Nor of that saucy one in the red skirt, who is beating the grain from the chaff with such a deft and tender movement. She'll be buried too, and so will this piebald gelding very soon, he thought. He'll be buried, and Fyodor the feeder, with his curly beard full of chaff and the shirt torn on his white shoulder, will also be buried. And above all, not only they, but I too will be buried, and nothing will be left. What for? So he's reflecting on his own mortality, on the fact that everything ends. Makes me think of the teaching of impermanence that is central to most religions, I think, at least Christianity, although some Christians would disagree. The teachings of Jesus always point to the fact that everything ends, everything is impermanent. I brought my other book of quotes. This is from the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew. Lay not up for yourself treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break in and steal. So he's saying, don't put your treasures on the dimension of form, where everything ends. That's what Jesus is telling us. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor dust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break in nor steal. So the teaching of impermanence, everything ends. So don't lay your treasures. What are your treasures? Your attention, what you value the most. Don't let externals be what you value the most. Because guess what? Everything ends, everything passes, everything is impermanent. On the other hand, lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. In heaven, it's not heaven like that. I think this is a misinterpretation. When Jesus talks about heaven, he doesn't talk about the sky or something above. It's a dimension of, it's the spiritual dimension that he calls heaven. Heaven, there's no form to the sky. There's no form. The sky is just space. That's why it's a good word to use. But when he says heaven, it's the spiritual dimension. And the spiritual dimension, where is it? It's nowhere around you, it's nowhere outside of you, it's in you. And Buddhism, one of the essential parts of the Buddhist teaching is the teaching of impermanence. Everything ends. Nothing lasts forever. So if you want to find happiness, fulfillment, the meaning of life, which is what Levin is trying to find, don't look for it in the dimension of time, in the dimension of space. Don't look for it in tomorrow, in yesterday, or there, or over there, or in the top of a mountain. No. Learn to return to that place where the meaning can truly be found. What that is, we'll see what Levin finds. So now, as he's reflecting on this, one of the people that work for him come to him and they engage in a conversation. And this is just in the middle of the conversation, where the worker is talking. These are the Levin's worker words. Well, that's how it is. People are different. One man just lives for his own needs. Take Mityuka even. Just stuffs his belly. But Fokanich, he's an upright old man. He lives for the soul. He remembers God. How's that? Remembers God? Lives for the soul? Levin almost shouted. Everybody knows how. By the truth. By God's way. People are different. Now, take you even. You wouldn't offend anybody either. And as this happens, the worker has to leave. But he lives in Levin a very profound idea. This one of living for the soul. A new joyful feeling came over him, over Levin, at the worker's words about Fokanich living for the soul, by the truth, by God's way. It was as if a host of vague but important thoughts burst from some locked up place, and all rushing towards the same goal, whirled through his head, blinding him with their light. He felt something new in his soul, and delightedly probed this new thing, not knowing what it was. This feeling was so joyful. So, as Levin starts reflecting on what the worker tells him about living for the soul, this sparks a moment of introspection in Levin where he gets out of his mind. He was immersed in his thoughts about the meaning of life, the meaning of death, the insignificance of life. And suddenly, at the probe of the worker's words, the idea of living for the soul, Levin gets into a sort of introspection where he's no longer thinking but feeling, and he finds something in himself. It's a feeling. It's like feeling his soul is probably the words that Tolstoy uses here. This feeling was so joyful that it seemed incredible to him. He was breathless with excitement and unable to walk any further. Went off the road into the woods and sat down on the unmowed grass in the shade of the aspens. Yes, I must collect myself and think it over, he thought. What makes me so glad? What have I discovered? I haven't discovered anything. I've only found out what I know. I've understood that power which not only gave me life in the past, but is giving me life now. I am freed from deception. I have found the master. So he's reflecting on what's happening. He's a very introspective person, and he's been battling with this meaninglessness in his life for a long time, and suddenly he thinks he found the answer. It's a feeling, and he sits down to reflect, what is this feeling? What have I found? Why am I feeling like this, so joyful? And the conclusion that he comes is, he's understood the power by which he lives. The power which not only gave me life in the past, but it is giving me life now. And this is a feeling. Which means, what does this mean in your life? You can find that power too. It's a power that's in yourself, in your being. The only problem is you need to look for it in the proper place. Makes me think of Henry David Thoreau again. I did a video of a book by him, so check it out. I'm going to put the link somewhere. But the quote that always comes back to me is one that he said, and it goes like this: many men go fishing all of their lives without knowing it isn't fish that they are after. And what he means is, basically he's giving us the advice, don't work so hard for the things that won't make you fulfilled. Your mind convinces you that you want fish, in this case, but in the end the fisherman realizes it's not fish that I wanted. It's not fish that made me fulfilled. It's not fish that gave meaning to my life. Of course, fish can be used as a metaphor for wealth or external possessions. But what is it then, if not external possessions, what we need to try to work towards finding in order to find the meaning of life? It's what Levin here has found: the soul, the power that is giving me life now, the master. You have access to that dimension in yourself. The only problem is you need to learn to look for it in the proper place. What's the proper place? It's not outside. It's not in a place outside of you. It's not in the top of the mountain. It's not in heaven. No, it's inside. And at the same time, it's not in the dimension of time. It's not in tomorrow. It's not in when you die. It's now. The only place that really exists. And then he keeps reflecting on this. Where did I take it from? Was it through reason that I arrived at the necessity of loving my neighbor and not throttling him? I was told it as a child, and I joyfully believed it, because they told me what was in my soul. And who discovered it? Not reason. So he's reflecting on how he found this joy, how he found his soul. It's not reason. You don't find it by thinking about it. And I think that's a very drastical idea. Why? Because you and I, we're always thinking. We give our thoughts so much importance. And guess what? The most important thing there is to find, you cannot find it by thinking. You cannot find it through reason. Reason discovered the struggle for existence and the law which demands that everyone who hinders the satisfaction of my desires should be throttled. That is the conclusion of reason. In other words, reason when you live in reason, you're an aggressive person. You always want to fight. You always want to compare yourself to others. It's a constant struggle when you live just in your mind. Reason could not discover love for the other because it's unreasonable. So what's the lesson here? Don't give your mind so much importance. We all fall in the trap that our minds place for ourselves, which is think about these thoughts. These are so important thoughts. Okay, how am I going to solve this problem? What do I want to be? Where do I want to be in the next 5 years? How am I going to get there? I'm going to do this and then that and then that. I really need to think about this, is what the mind convinces you of. But guess what? Let go of your mind. It's not so important. There's something so much more important underneath your mind. And that's your soul. It's the observer. It's the dimension from which you can observe your mind. And then he describes this as the chief miracle possible for each person. To understand one and the same thing with certainty, and to compose that life of the soul, which alone makes life worth living, and alone is what we value. So he's saying the number one miracle is finding your soul, to compose that life of the soul. Levin had stopped thinking and was as if only listening to the mysterious voices that spoke joyfully and anxiously about something among themselves. Can this be faith? He wondered, afraid to believe his happiness. My God, thank you, he said, choking back the rising sobs, and with both hands wiping away the tears that filled his eyes. So he's found salvation. He's found the answer to his existential question. And the answer is, find the life of your soul. Stop thinking. Realize that there's so much more to you than your mind. Return to the present moment is another way that I would put it as, because that's the only place where you can find your soul. Anything else is time. Anything else is tomorrow, yesterday, my problems, comparing myself to others, criticizing others, trying to be better than others, feeling insecure. All of that is the bubble. The bubble that Levin was speaking of is what we can call the ego, your small self. This idea that you have in your mind of who you are. That's always so frail and fragile, and you have to protect it at all times. How do you protect it? By comparing yourself to others, by criticizing others, by judging others, by trying to find fulfillment in the future, or by your inability to let go of the past. Because guess what? What your mind convinces you is, if you let go of the past, you won't have an identity. Let go of all those egoic mechanisms and start living in the present moment. That's the only place where you'll find your soul. Find that dimension which exists behind your thoughts. That's the spiritual dimension, the observer. How can you do this? Let's finish with that. How can you do this? Learn to return to the present moment as much as possible. And instead of thinking about today or tomorrow or what I'm going to do after this, instead of doing that, learn to return to the present moment, the sounds around you. And you can feel your body. If you want to find your soul, you need to start looking for it in the proper place. inside instead of outside. That's heaven, in the words of Jesus that I shared with you. Heaven, he says, heaven and earth. Earth is the dimension of form, externals, thought, emotions. And what's heaven? Heaven is the dimension of spaciousness, we can say. The space that allows everything to be there. The space that allows your thoughts to be there. If you start paying attention to that, you'll be closer to your soul. And the first step to do that is learn to return to the present moment. And feel your body. Feel your hands. The life that your hands are, we can say. And when you try to do this, your attention goes to your hands. And maybe your mind starts complaining, what is this? This is so strange. Feel my hands. Feel the life that's in my hands. What is this all about? But suddenly, as you quiet down and keep focusing on your body, you start feeling something there. And you go, oh, yes. And the same with your feet. Can you feel your feet making contact with the ground? Your body making contact with the chair? If you want to find your soul, if you want to find the meaning of life, like Levin did in the end, you need to learn to return. You need to live an inward life. What's an inward life? It's a life where you acknowledge internal phenomena as important. Usually we don't. Usually we just pay attention to what's happening outside and work and family life, and I have to do this, I have to go to the football game tomorrow and all of that. I have to plan my holidays for the summer in 6 months, and then I live waiting for it. All that, it's an external life. That's okay. I'm not saying renounce that. No, but find a balance between external and internal. What's internal life? It starts with being aware of your thoughts, the mind, the chatter that you have in your mind, how it criticizes others, how it thinks about the future, how it can't let go of the past, how much it hates the present moment. If you've put the effort in trying to be more present, you'll soon realize the mind hates the present moment. The mind will fight with all of its energy to try to prevent you from living in the present moment. Because guess what? The present moment is the end of the mind. When you live in the present moment fully, there's no thought. And suddenly you realize a surge of joyfulness, of peace in your heart, in your chest. It's like a fire that's burning inside of you. Imagine you have a candle flame that's burning at the very core of who you are, and you can feel the warmth and the joyfulness that comes with it, and the peace that comes with it. When you're able to feel that, 1, you're not thinking, and 2, you're closer to your soul. And like Levin says, you're closer to God. So, yeah, that's it. Anna Karenina, great book. It's really fun. I would recommend it. I really would. And my wife would too. Because as I told you, this is her favorite book. But anyway, thanks again for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope that you take something important with you. If you've liked this, if you're taking something with you, let me know what it is in the comments below. And if you've found this content beneficial and useful, please support my channel by either liking, subscribing, or both, or by sharing, whatever it is. And yes, and check out my other videos, which I'm sure you'll enjoy as well if you've liked this. So yeah, that's all for today. Thank you so much. I hope you're well and take care of yourself. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.